dear Bob, thanks for your time first of all. So could you please tell us about yourself first, so we can?
Well, growing up in the 50s and 60s, the constitutional issue, independence, devolution, were not a big issue. It was with, some politicos, and there had been issues about Scottish Home Rule right from the late 18th century onwards. And interestingly, Keir Hardie, who was the founder of the Labour Party, one of his policies was advocating Home Rule for Scotland. Now, there's always been an argument about what is Home Rule. Is Home Rule independence or is it devolution? But it started in the 70s. I would say that one of the catalysts for the independence movement was the oil crisis in the 70s. And up till then, basically speaking, working people, their conditions were improving, wages, other issues there. And then after that, and with a Tory government with Margaret Thatcher, we started to see austerity and unemployment. And at the same time, Scotland also had the North Sea oil boom, which we weren't getting any benefits from. So I think that was a driver where, while it had always been an issue, it became a popular issue with the majority of people. And we saw that. But there was always vested interest. The professional politicians in London, I mean, my experience has been that you'll never get politicians to give up power. You've got to grab it from them. And that was happening. And there's an unfairness about it. The Labour government in the late 70s did introduce a form of devolution for a Scottish Assembly, and the vote got a majority, but because one of the politicians had put in a clause which had never happened before, where you had to get 40% of the people voting, it failed, and that was seen as a dirty trick to some extent. So into the 80s, and this unfairness caused me to become a member of the campaign for a Scottish Assembly, which I think was a successful model, whereby we had people of all political parties and none, academics, trade unionists, church people, all involved in that. And eventually that campaign for the Scottish Assembly came up with a number of documents. This document...
So let's start with that one first. What document is that? If you can also show it to camera.
Well, that was really a blueprint. It was dotting the I's and stroking the T's about how we would achieve that. Not just a broad statement, but the actual detail of what would happen. The form of the representation, the voting system. Now, this was very, very important because a lot of the people involved in the campaign for a Scottish Assembly were advocating proportional representation, proportional voting, PR, a fairer system of the votes. So that was central to that, because if we hadn't supported proportional representation, then I think we wouldn't have got the consensus which we needed, and that sort of a support. So that was important. And interestingly enough, I, as the vice chairman of the Scottish Labour Party, managed with a lot of intrigue and I managed to get the Scottish Labour Party to support proportional representation in the Parliament. And I think that was central to keeping people on board this consensus. And as I said, the campaign set up
Yeah.
the Scottish Constitutional Convention,
So
which
that's
is,
very important. Also, Kurds are seeking for constitutional rights.
yeah,
But so, how did you manage to have this Scotland's constitutional establishment, and what is including in that?
yeah. Well, as I said earlier, if you like, that was stage one, the draft of this. So the campaign for a Scottish Assembly came up with this draft, which then came to this document. And I can remember we had what we called a convention, a Scottish convention, in the Church of Scotland assembly halls in Edinburgh, where most of the most organisations in Scotland were represented. The political parties, the trade unions, the churches, local government, and as I said, we managed to get that consensus there, and really, from that convention in 1980, we went on, and the whole idea of the convention became accepted. So eventually, when we got rid of the Conservative government, it was really unstoppable. My own view is I think that Tony Blair, as the Prime Minister at that time, again, this comes back to my experience, you never get politicians giving up power to other groups. But by that time, the support for the convention was unstoppable, and it would have been politically dynamite to stop it, though Blair did throw in a few grenades to try and limit the, for example, he introduced a second question in the referendum, which was about tax raising powers. Now, if you're going to have a parliament that doesn't have tax raising powers, it's not going to be a real parliament. So I remember we had a big fight about that. But interestingly enough, when we did have the referendum, we had 75% for setting up a Scottish Parliament, and 65% voted to have the tax raising powers. So Blair was proved wrong there. But as I said, often you'll find this out. Nothing's ever straightforward, and don't trust people, especially when you're asking them to give up some of their powers.
Yeah. So when we come to the devolution, how the process started and finished, like how the Scottish authorities take the power back, or was it just the paperwork? Like how did it work? How was the process shortly?
Well, at the time when it was set up, and can I just say, one of the things I've found out as a trade unionist is two issues which to me I think are important, which is compromise and consensus. And I think the establishment of the Scottish Parliament was based on that, and continuing that. And I think the development of the Scottish Parliament, whether it's a totally independent Scotland or part of a federal or a confederal Britain, depends on that. Because to me, if you've got, say, 51% vote for independence and 49% against, that's a recipe for disaster. You have to try and win that consensus. And at that time, it might mean you don't go as fast as you would want, and you might have to stop for a while people accept these new, developments and new rights. And often people vote for fear rather than hope. And I think we've got to get people to have hope and voting for hope. So I think the other thing is that this proportional voting system was supposed to try and ensure that not one party had an overall majority, and therefore you had to work again with this consensus. And in the main, that has worked. So I think we've seen a lot of positive things in Scotland. Just to mention there, prescriptions, health service prescriptions. Now, early on, the Scottish Parliament voted to make prescriptions free. And interestingly enough, the Welsh Assembly followed Scotland in that. But if you're in England and say you've got a cold or a flu and you've got to, say, get 2 prescriptions, you're talking about £20 now, which, for people just on the margin is quite a lot of money. Also in Scotland, we don't have tuition fees for university students. So these are things which are quite important, and I think got there. And again, in Scotland, for example, the Tories, the Conservatives in the Scottish Parliament don't challenge the thing like free prescription charges or free bus passes for young people and old people and all that, because they know that it wouldn't be popular in Scotland, because there's a consensus that that's the thing to do. So to me, that's been that very important issue in Scotland that we have, and it comes back to me. There's no doubt in my mind, while we're the SNP, the Scottish National Party, which has now been in power for 20 years and that, arguing for another independence referendum. Now, my own opinion on that is that people should be given a choice. The last time it was just binary, it was either for or against. Now, my view is that people should be given a choice of, is it independence or more devolution, what people call Devo Max. So my view here is that I think that to take people, you want to take both the skeptics and the people with you. So I think that my view would be that we should, if there was going to be a referendum, it should give a choice. It should give a choice, say, either independence or federalism. My own personal view is, which doesn't get all that much exposure, is confederalism, because a crucial issue in this is that Scotland is only 5% of the population in Britain, and again the Welsh, much the same. So if in a federal situation, England would always be able to outvote Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, whereas in a confederal system you would need unanimous agreement. So Scotland, with only its 5% of the overall population, would be able to have a veto. So again, that would force a UK government in Westminster, again, that to understand that they would have to have this compromise and consensus.
So, just to wrap up that topic, do you think the Edinburgh and Westminster's relation is democratic, and is it like a democratic, equal, peaceful? What kind of relation is there? What is the reality behind the scenes?
It's
Of course, the confederal system would be much more democratic
yeah.
than this,
Yeah.
but how should we understand this?
The answer here is that it differs. I mean, you've got, for example, Labour Party politicians who may be in the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, but would like to be in the UK Parliament in Westminster. So you've got these tensions pulling them there. Do you want to be, what we used to say, a big fish in a wee pond, or a wee fish in a big pond? And you do get that there. And I think one of the things you've got to understand here just now is that people in England, but especially politicians in Westminster, really don't understand nationalism and independence and people's need, to control themselves, because you find that out that they actually don't understand people's feelings. And I found this out as a trade union official, that I was Scottish secretary of the biggest trade union, but when I was taking issues to our head office in London, they thought, every time I said, but we're different in Scotland, we've got a different administrative structure, they just thought, oh, this is just, nationalism and all that, and they didn't take it serious. And I still think there is that issue there, not taking it serious. There's, as I said, this issue of giving up power, but also this issue of not understanding the feelings that people have. I mean, for example, there, not happens so much now, but you would go to London and that, and people are calling all Scots jock. Okay, jock, and they do the same with the Irish, calling them paddy. Everybody's paddy. Or in Wales, die. And it's a form of, really, if you like, saying, well, look, we're better than you in that. So I don't think in England people have taken the issue about what's happening. And we're now in a situation where the devolved parliaments in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland are all political parties which are looking for independence. And it's something that the politicians have got to take on board. And I think they've got to be radical. They've got to be very radical and see to the future.
Yeah.
And for example, the federal or confederal structure would be a major giving up of power, which is difficult for politicians. And again, I think looking at history, and I read a lot of political history and all that, I think politicians nowadays are all very short term. They can only see to the next election rather than see, for the future and what's going to be best. Because we did, you get principles with politicians with principles, moral ethics, and a vision. And half of them nowadays are just, it's a political job. And when that's finished, they go jobs in industry and what have you and all that. So it is difficult. But I think the current situation there with Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland um, having a majority of people for that, something is going to have to change. Um, it actually is, I think, some people looking out, looking in externally would think there is the danger of actual, if not revolution, agitation. And that agitation could take stronger forms than just politics. It's quite surprised we haven't had it. We had it in Northern Ireland, um, but we haven't had it elsewhere. But I think there's no doubt about it. Um, I think we're going to have to, we'll see, particularly here in Scotland, more devolution. But again, this is this issue of vision and a medium term vision, if nothing else. That rather than grudgingly give a small bit at a time, they should try and be radical and do something radical. Now, some radical things like the tax raising powers, employment law, all that would be something. And that, if we did get these radical changes, it would perhaps keep the independence issue there, but it could contain it for 10 years, or a generation. But as I said, these politicians just don't have that vision. Because the other thing is that the political debate is the issue about the constitutional issue takes up a great deal of the time, not just the Parliament but elsewhere. And there's arguments at that time and consideration could be better used about improving things like our health service, our education, and talking about that there. So it would be good to try and put the constitutional issue to bed for a period and let that, if you like, bed in, let that be consolidated. And then people, if they want to go further for independence, they can do that. And my argument and my experience as a union official negotiating with good and bad employers and everything else is that that once you've got a stage, you can win people over. A good example of that was when we had introduced in Britain the national minimum wage, so that people had to get a minimum wage. There was a lot of opposition at the time, and people were saying it's going to cost jobs, and people are going to get all this and that. And in fact, after it's now 20 years now, and that hasn't happened. So nobody now says national minimum wage is a bad idea. So my view would be is if we introduce things like the Parliament having tax raising powers, then people would accept that. Because sometimes the reason people don't want devolution or going further independence is that they are apprehensive about what would happen. Whereas, as I say, moving in these steps, I think you'll get that consensus in due course to say, right, well, we're okay.
So, just to end up everything, I also like to ask a personal question because you have been witnessing how the Scottish Parliament established.
Yeah.
So, what do you remember from that days? Like, what is the most important memory for you from these days, and how did you feeling about it? Like, how does it make you feel to have your own governing system, to run your own business? And do you think this is like fully independent or democratic? So, like personally, what do you remember from that days? How was the atmosphere? Is that the people who of the Scottish people what they are looking for the history?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I've always been a radical and a revolutionary in my own way. And I saw that as the start of a process for a better Scotland. And to me, there was that satisfaction on that. And I think my most important contribution was in pushing through proportional representation. I think that is an important issue. So seeing that Parliament, and quite a diverse Parliament, more women in the Parliament, more from different groups of people as well, racially diverse, everything else. So to me, I thought that was a great time, a great time.
something I didn't ask. Anything you would like to say very shortly? You can have your last words.
Well, the one thing which, as I said, I'd done a little swatting up, which was that I was quite interested in the bit about Rojava and the fact that there was a sort of a confederacy there, because it's a pet subject in my confederacy. A lot of people don't talk about confederacy. They all talk about federalism, but not confederalism.
Confederalism is more democratic
Yeah, yeah.
confederalism. Yeah.
Well, so that's to me been quite an interesting thing that we should have, because, as I've said before, in a federal system, Scotland, the other nations would always be outvoted by England if you had say you had a one parliament, then obviously that parliament 90% is going to be England, so you could always get. And I mean, for example, in the Scottish Parliament there, for example, what's been happening in Gaza and the Lebanon and all that are issues which, is we've taken a very radical view on that. So to me, that's an important measure. And if we had a confederal system there, then the Scottish Parliament would be able to say to the UK, we're not sending arms to Israel, period. So to me, that's quite important.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Very kind of you.
No,
Thank
no,
you so
that's